image. Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today and having me as the moderator for the panel. I think it's an absolutely incredible opportunity to dive into and hear directly from people that represent institutions, but also from an artist that has really cracked the code of how to bring arts and experiences straight to the public. I think, without further ado, I would love for everyone to maybe quickly introduce themselves, and then we're going to jump into the questions. Maybe Merel, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Welcome. So yeah, I'm Merel. I'm the founder of Next Museum. Next is a museum dedicated to new media art in Amsterdam. I founded it together with Natasha, who's sitting here also. And I think in a nutshell, we try to do things very differently to the kind of existing museum landscape, where we didn't necessarily start from a collection. We didn't start with a public funding from the government, as many museums in the Netherlands do, or with a heritage building or a heritage collection. We just really felt that in Amsterdam, there were many, many white cube gallery spaces representing established artists. And in my time living in London and also a bit in Paris, Natasha is from London, we saw all this experiment and all these amazing artworks, future art forms, and we had an entrepreneurial idea to do it ourselves. So we found a big studio space in the north of Amsterdam with a lot of power. We call it superpower, krachtstroom in Dutch. High ceilings, acoustic panels, thick concrete floors. And after interviewing really a lot of new media artists, that was exactly what we needed. So yeah, we did it ourselves, and now we've been alive for 4 years, and we have our third exhibition live.
That's incredible. How many people here have been to the Next Museum? Can you raise your hand? All right, we have 20% of the room. This is actually quite a good turnout. Regina, without further ado.
Long time no see.
Yes.
Instead of talking about myself, I'll talk a little bit more about Museum of the Moving Image. Since we opened our doors in 1988, we have always supported the full spectrum of what moving image means. It's never just been focused on, the history of film and video. In fact, one of the first commissions that we ever did for the opening was a piece called Getaway Car, which was a Namjoon commission with over 60 CRT monitors on a car chassis, and they worked directly with the museum to get all the archival footage that was used in the work. And we hosted machinima festivals really early on. If you don't know what machinima is, just think like La Turbo Avedon. And we continue to do that today, where we always have to keep up with emerging technologies and how they affect the moving image. So I'm a student for life of this medium.
Excited to talk about it more. And how many people have been to MoMI? Oh, good turnout, yes. Maya. And the next is Sasha.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sasha Styles. Thank you so much for having me. I'm a poet and an artist, and I do a lot of work at the intersection of text and technology, which means that a lot of my work is multimedia, a little bit hard to categorize. But I think the gist of it is that, I'm really interested with my language art practice, with my poetry practice, and sort of pushing words and literature beyond the printed page. And I'm very fascinated by how new technologies can enable artists and writers to take text-based work and kind of reconfigure it and manifest it in new ways, and use digital tools to kind of create new relationships between writers and readers, and to really think about where we can take poetry, how we can maybe push it beyond the library, out of the bookstores, out of academia, and put it into places like museums, like public art spaces, like the Outer Net in London, where I just had the privilege of showing, like on the facade of buildings in Basel, as I'm very fortunate to be able to do this week. So really interested in all the different ways that technology can really help us, I think, make poetry feel relevant and valuable, which it certainly is, but sometimes doesn't get credit for. And to that end, I'll just say very quickly too, I'm co-founder of an NFT literary gallery called Diverseverse, which is really all about this idea of letting poetry kind of become all the things that it wants to be in this modern age. And we're really devoted to the idea that poetry is an art form, that it deserves to sit alongside other forms of art, performance, music, and that it also is a technology and sort of deserves to be taken seriously in its digital forms as well as in its printed forms. So and thanks again for having me here.
Amazing. And where can people see the projections you mentioned?
So they're at Bronx Bodega Basel, which is over on the Novartis campus, which is, I think, a quick cab ride, but it's a fun spot to go for.
Every evening?
Every evening. They're starting from, I think, about 10 o'clock until 2 a.m. every evening this week. Yeah.
Nice. So thank you so much for the introductions. You mentioned white cube, so maybe I'll jump on that. So the concept is essentially you sort of distill the space, and the main focus is on the artwork. And now, what I think digital art, one of the best qualities is that it's fluid. It sort of flows, it goes beyond the walls, it breaks the walls, it transcends boundaries. There's so much that can be done with it. But at the same time, you guys are all sort of pioneers in your field. And to do something new always takes trial and error. And so I think what I'm very interested in hearing, in no particular order, like this is an open conversation, is maybe we start with what were some of like the biggest learnings at the beginning when you start? Like, are there any interesting stories of like you've tried this didn't work, and that's why we're doing things differently? And Regina, you're already smiling, so I think you can start.
I don't know. I just feel like I've been to hell and back over the years. So there's I don't have a specific story, but before I was at the museum, I was a director of programming for a startup. And the way the startup worked is we would convince landlords to let us take over their vacant spaces. We had 26 spaces across New York City at one point. And we're talking, these spaces weren't meant for art. They were like concrete and brick walls. And like, I remember having to take a drill and like dip it in water to cool it down just to like get through the wall, and like we did insane hangs and work. So like just I don't know, I would even try to do technical interviews back then with artists just to figure out how to show their work. But like if you need advice on how to install in like crazy locations, I've seen it all, to the point where like as many of you probably know, I curated the Araya Harvey exhibition that's at MoMI now until July 7th. We're probably extending it. And whenever something would like go wrong, like, you know, oh, we won't get this like plexi until like the day before the opening, I'd be like, it's gonna be fine, you know, because at that point, after like 200 crazy shows, you just mellow out after a while, and you're open to anything, which I think we need to be with digital art. Like something always breaks constantly. Like we have video games that are playable up in the show, and one is down like every single day, and you just have to love the problems. You must love like the issues with the digital to be in this field. You know, like
be ready for the problems. Yes. I love that point, and I think for anyone entering this space, they have to sort of embrace the fact that we're pushing the boundaries, we're trying something new. Merel, I'm sure you have experience.
I can totally relate to that. It's like we have even in our app we have a percentage for the downtime of the exhibitions, and I think last week it was 99% was up. But we've had weeks where a robot wasn't working, where one of the beautiful light installations, one of the tracking devices was wrong, lights flickering everywhere. Like that's, yeah, exactly. You need to love it, but we have an amazing production team and a solid like Slack or WhatsApp or whatever group that's just always on call. Mm-hmm. But I think from a museum perspective or investment perspective financially, I think we've learned so much. Like we're learning every day. And I think one of the big learnings, which is also something that saved us, but for example, we rented all the hardware because also we do rotating exhibitions. So you constantly have artists using or wanting different types of projectors versus screens versus sound systems, computers, etc., etc. But I think that saved us in the pandemic, because what you rent, you can put on hold in terms of payments, and it's not a massive upfront investment. But we've also now learned that we are just burning through money by constantly renting. And so I think for us, I mean, there's learnings across the board from every angle. So I have like 2 hours worth of content for that session. But I think the big one for us is how to program when you have digital art or new media art, how to set up your hardware systems. Do you rent? Do you buy? How to service? And how can you maintain that?
Yeah.
Because it's expensive. It's a lot more expensive than maybe other art forms. Yeah, they need cooling or heating, etc., etc. So everything is difficult. But I think there we have a lot of learnings.
And I think this often comes underappreciated, like the amount of work curators put into the setup, working with everyone, and then people only see the final thing, and if something is wrong, that's it. You're canceled. Like, so it's good to hear like behind the scenes. And I think, Sasha, considering you do things often which are sort of short in duration, how do you manage that? Because obviously, like, you can't rent out equipment for several months. Like, do you locally source equipment when it's needed? Do you work with teams? Like, could you give us a few examples?
Sure, and I think I'll tie that in with maybe an answer to the previous question too, because this is all resonating quite a lot, and just wanted to offer like the artist perspective on some of this too. I think, you know, as someone who creates a lot of digital art, mixed media art, not exclusively, but you know, that is the area I play quite a lot in. I think I often get requests for work that kind of assume that because something is digital, that it's endlessly versatile and that it can sort of be resized to fit any equipment that might be readily available, or that as long as there's a screen in place that I can make a digital piece of mine work for that. And I think one of the things I've been learning myself, and also that I'm trying to articulate more and more when I'm working on collaborations with institutions and with venues, is that sometimes that's appropriate, sometimes you can make it work, but it's also really, really helpful when you do have the opportunity to really kind of create from scratch and create something that is using the venue as your canvas, and really thinking not just about like a screen, a surface, but how do you think about the entirety of the space? How do you think about, you know, how do you activate with sound and with light? How do you create movement and flow through a space? How do you consider the way visitors are going to enter, see it from outside, hear music, hear poetry being read, you know, over the loudspeakers from down the block? All these things are really, really important to me as an artist. And so when I'm thinking about creating a site-specific work, whether or not it's short in duration or something that's up for a long time, I think about it as a performance and really as like a cohesive kind of holistic piece where I do need to think about all those things. What is the intro? What is the buildup? What is the climax? You know, how does it sort of release you at the end? Like, all these things are really important to me. So I like to be able, whenever it is possible, to work with the team, to work with especially the technical team, maybe that's on site, and really get a good sense of, you know, exactly what I have to work with, exactly what the framework is, and then be prepared to take maybe an idea, to take fragments of a work, if there's an existing piece that I'm adapting, and kind of reconfigure it. And it's almost, to me, like taking a script for a play or something, and then mounting a new production wherever you go. And I have to think about the cast and think about the set and think about, you know, how everything comes together in this new space.
Are there any like examples of what you did recently that you think this, like, the audience was absolutely in awe? Like, I mean, I'm sure for everyone, but like, was there like one that you're like, okay, this I want to repeat at some point on a bigger scale?
Well, the Outernet piece that I mentioned earlier in London was pretty interesting because it was a very big scale, and it was sort of an idea that I'd played with in different forms, but had never thought to put together as a multi-channel immersive installation. And so that was a chance to really, you know, bring it to life in a totally different way. on that note, I recently released a collection of 4 multimedia poems called 4 Core Texts, and released that in April. And they're all, poem movies. And I was able to release them and present them at the beginning as a store takeover with Bang & Olufsen, who kind of were very generous in letting me develop the project with their display technologies in mind. And so I was able to bring it to life through their speakers, through their visuals. But I'd like to think about how that set of poems, which is sort of meant to be a cohesive short film, really, how that could live outside that environment, and what would that look like? What would that feel like? How to make that something a little bit more immersive and performative, and take it somewhere different.
I just wanted to add to what you just said, that from a museum point of view, our team gets so excited working with artists and really kind of going back and forth. And we have a brilliant technical man, Dominic, and he builds huge, big spaces all over the world, and programs and maps, for example, the big projection surfaces from London to Australia. And he loves working at Next because he gets to just play with the artists. And also the team of Random International almost wanted to hire him. They were like, oh my God, we've just optimized this work, and these sensors are now faster. And the people actually love working with artists in that way.
I also wanted to add that what you're talking about is such a great example of the fact that media art is meant to be mutable, not immutable. And what a great example of that. It's supposed to be fluid, as you said, Alex. We need to think about this versioning and what we call iteration, which is common in conservation as well. We do these things called iteration reports that track how works are installed over time and how they change. It's why we say variable media art. It's variable. So thank you for that.
I think also there's this thing called blockchain, and maybe we can bring it into the conversation. So I think that 10 minutes. I see this as interactive art is also now possible to have this sort of ownership of the piece, which I think adds a lot of engagement, but also a relationship, co-creation. I think co-creation element, like what we saw with the introduction of live minting, and now we're seeing it in other forms. And I'm sure all of you have experience with that. How have you found that experience? And what do you think about the idea of visitors sort of going away from the exhibition, having something to hold on to after, Regina?
I have no poker face.
No, you don't.
Oh, wow. So museums, I tend to disagree with the way they've been going about this process. I personally do, and this is my personal opinion, I do not think that museums should be selling NFTs. However, that doesn't mean that they can't be engaging with them. I think the idea of, I always think about the Malraux concept of the museum without walls. And media art is always in that spirit, this idea that things don't have to just be confined to the white cube or confined to the museum space. In the 90s, the whole concept around net art is we don't even need institutions anymore. We could show online. Of course, a lot of these artists now do want to be canonized in this way. But yeah, we should be showing work online. We should be offering the ability for visitors to take something from the museum free. I think about Louise Lawler in a MoMA installation, had this stack of newspapers, you could take away one, or Felix Gonzalez Torres, when you take a candy. It's a very emotional experience, but you're taking that piece with you, that weight of that piece. And so this is where I find that interesting with blockchain.
So, well, we've done a few experiments tapping into that, but I'm a bit scared if it was actually on the blockchain after your previous talk, but I think so. But what we've basically been doing exactly that. So I think 2 experiments are quite relevant to highlight, I think. One is that we've had POAPs, proof of attendance protocol, throughout the museum. And one of them, we made a proof of attention protocol, where you didn't just scan a QR and you get it, but you actually had to answer a few questions about the work. And what we saw was that we got really funny answers, but also people actually then took the time to sit in the work, to observe it, to see the various layers that are to the work, and then could collect their POAP, which was for us a way to engage maybe a young audience that goes through museums fast, that you have to keep engaged by. Do you do text on the wall? Do you have a QR code? How do you make them read or find out more about the work? How do you make them sit down and slow down? And this was one of the elements that did seem to work. And I think in the first 3 months or something, there were like 10,000 POAPs collected already. And we had 4 in the museum. So it was really, really nice experiment, but we also saw a huge drop-off after a while. So it was kind of a bit of a hype at that time. And I think the other example, which we really, really loved, was during Amsterdam Dance Event, we had a residency program with 13 DJs and 10 visual artists that were doing incredible, VJ sets, DJ sets together. And they also created a live minting opportunity. So we had 30% of the visitors of ADE scan the QR and got to live mint a part of the DJ set of that night from the visual artist and the DJ. So that was all for free. So we didn't charge anything. We just wanted to experiment and see how people engaged. And just to round it off, I think our biggest learning is that there's still a lot of kind of a knowledge gap, I think, and people get really scared. Yeah. So that was when you say wallet or when you say blockchain, people get like, oh my God, what do I need to do? And I think for everyone here in the room, it's probably easy, piece of cake. But I think for probably 90% of the museum visitors, is still very scary.
Yeah, that's actually when you mentioned like the sit down and take time. If that reminded me, if anyone is in London this summer, there's a partnership between Trilitech through Tezos to mint an experience. So there's a Judy Chicago show at the Serpentine, and there's sort of like a hidden space. Not a kiosk, where you can, I know the word is, where you can sit down and you get a chance to answer one of the questions that from one of a series of Judy Chicago's works. And you, by answering the question, it gets recorded, but you also get a token that you can take home. And I think that's a wonderful example of where you can sort of like hide in peace, interact with the work, get something to take home. I see a big sign saying 5 minutes. There's a lot to mention. Maybe something I would love everyone to share is like something for people to take home about what you're working on, any exciting upcoming projects. And I can finish it up as well with an exciting project update.
Well, yeah, there's always so many exciting things coming up, but I actually really wanted to mention like 1 or 2, I guess they're ongoing sort of projects, but things that are related to what you guys were just saying. It's been really, really fun to get to sort of combine this idea of engagement in Museum Without Walls with blockchain. And I think like both, for my personal practice, I've had some really fun opportunities to do interactive works where you actually are minting a work, but you're kind of doing it without almost realizing that you're minting something, where the act of minting is maybe embodied by interaction with a piece. And one sort of example of that, which we're still sort of working on with the Verse, is a couple years ago, we actually created a live minting poetry activation at an event called Proof of People in London. And the whole event was centered around this idea of using a camera built by a genius creative coder named Ross Goodwin, who's been a really good friend of mine and an inspiration for me for many years now. He built this AI camera to sort of take your photo and then in real time translate the photo via keywords and image recognition into a poem. And we worked with him to kind of develop this and integrate poems by all the poets in the verse, and sort of create this AI poet embodied in a vintage camera attached to a series of really interesting technologies, and we invited people to come and sit for their portrait and have their portrait taken, and then, you know, leave with their own unique poem written by an AI in response to their image. And I think it was really, really nice for them to get to have the experience of blockchain, but sort of be gently led into it through a very personal interaction. And then, you know, again, to have this entire sort of collection or anthology of poems and this sort of you know, exhibition of images to sift through via Tezos, via Object, when they got home, and that was really powerful. So we're continuing to kind of evolve that idea of being able to create these in-person experiences that embody a lot of the technologies in ways that kind of, you know, maybe we're taking away some of the jargon, some of the, you know, some of the terminology that might be intimidating, and just turning it into something that feels familiar, but also a little bit different. And I think that's been a good way for us to sort of onboard people to ideas like tokens, like blockchain, like wallets, and like artificial intelligence.
Yeah, still holding on to mine.
Well, our museum is not a stranger to showcasing artists that have registered work to blockchains. We've shown Pixel Fool and Francois Gamma, and we acquired Tide Predictor, which from Lovid and Artblocks. And we will continue to do projects that that showcase, really like give a spotlight to artists who are experimenting with blockchain technology, because it's inherent to the current landscape of what it means to be interacting with moving image. So look out for that, and maybe an announcement towards the end of the month.
So for us, the most exciting thing at the moment is we have launched a foundation at the moment to actually start collecting art. We started with presenting and commissioning and doing things totally differently, but I think we also learned that you can't do the most amazing stuff just based on ticket sales. So we are really kind of reinventing ourselves. We're growing up, and I think one of the dreams that Natasha and I have is to build a public art collection that's really, one of the really forward-looking collections in the Netherlands. And I think our ideas are always to do that in a more forward-looking way. And ideally, we don't have any physical contracts, pieces of paper, etc. But we really try to find new, interesting and forward-looking ways to collect. But also the complexities of it, the funding you need to even build the team to be able to do that in the right way, is something that's trial and error and experiment. But that's why we're here, to experiment and to hopefully pave the way, make loads of mistakes so other museums can then not make the same mistakes. So also from my point of view, if there's any people in the room and also learning from the transfer gallery model, from your learnings, we would love to actually collaborate with people to create this experimental framework to build the collection of the future.
Amazing,
So just 10 seconds, I'd be remiss not to also add, speaking of museums and tokens, I'm actually also working on something really exciting with HEC. So stay tuned, coming soon.
Exciting, so much hype. Okay, just to quickly...
Since I see you sitting there.
Just to quickly sum it up, don't miss experiences this week that you're projecting. Don't miss checking out the next museum. I'm excited that, something exciting is coming. I wonder what it is with Momi.
Alex knows, nobody else knows.
But we have been exploring what the future might look like for art on the blockchain with Regina. So I don't want to give out too much. But speaking of interactive experiences, I don't know if you had a chance to stop by Space 31, which is just down the street. But there is an incredible installation by Object with Anna Livia, who is from the 80s, the pioneer in performance art and cybernetics. So it is an opportunity to live mint, and it's interactive. So your body movement is projected on the display. So if you get the chance, I really recommend checking it out. And thank you to all the panelists today and having us.
As my promise for the audience, I don't know who that was. We will do Q&A, so we will take one questions. Any questions? Yes. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all your words. I wanted to understand both from a museum perspective and also as an artist perspective. How do you balance cutting edge technology with education? As you said, there is a big problem of information. How do you balance the two things, for example, in your museum and also in your art?
I can start by answering that. So I am really focused on digital literacy initiatives, and we also have an amazing education department at the museum that over 70,000 students pass through every year. We have a teen summer program, for example, where students learn how to use VR, and through the Araya show, we did 3D printing workshops, etc. Like as much hands-on as possible. We also offer, like, I forget what the program's called, but like New York City teachers can take workshops at the museum to learn about emerging technologies. I can't like announce the whole project, but we did receive a grant for next year that will help through artist workshops and performances teach more about digital literacy, because I really believe like if you don't understand the technology, then you can't make decisions around it. So it's really important. So a lot of front-facing work is happening on our end.
So I think from our end, what we've really learned is that there's a big gap between the high schools and then the universities or kind of art schools and things like that. And I think the Netherlands has incredible talent and incredible educations when it comes to art and tech also, and a lot of talent coming from our brilliant country. But when it comes to high schools, we've actually started partnering with them because they see a gap in what you learn there, and also a lack of teachers in the field of kind of, informatica, it's called in Dutch, so probably like developing mathematics, not maths, but I don't even know how to translate it, the pressure. So what we're doing with him is we're actually developing a program with the school that's close to us to bridge that gap. And that comes down to kind of teaching about AI, so more about the ethics around AI, how to deal with that, creative coding, and we also have one that's around filter creation, which is a bit more kind of easy, more accessible, and then it gets more kind of complex. So it's really exciting for us to do that, but again, like I said, we just launched a foundation, and we're now applying for public funding to really build those programs, because the schools don't necessarily have the budget, and we don't have the budget, but we do have kind of the network of people that can help teach, and also artists that are really happy to jump in and teach these programs and then connect it to the exhibition, for example. So I think it's a very good question, and it's something we're super actively working on as we speak.
Yeah, and I would add, I think it is really, really important to sort of build larger context around a lot of these projects that are rooted in technology for all the reasons that you guys have just stated. I think I always try to balance that with, you know, the desire not to be too didactic, too literal. I really want the work that I do to be really infused and very much an expression of a distillation of all the thinking and all the work that I'm doing about the complicated challenges that these technologies bring, and to enable an audience that might not be as familiar with them to have a very visceral, personal encounter with those technologies. So, for example, one of the things I'm working on now that's actually coming up next week, I'm going to be doing a live AI poetry workshop with a humanoid android named Bina48, who I've been working closely with for about 6 years now, and we're doing a live workshop at Lincoln Center next week where we're going to be, you know, stationed there. We're going to be interacting live with the audience. We're going to be creating poetry in real time and really enabling, you know, folks who come through to have the opportunity to interact directly with this machinic poet, mediated, you know, of course, like through a human poet as well. But I think the idea is to create an environment where it feels accessible, it feels exciting and exhilarating and surprising, but also somewhat comfortable. And, you know, it's not a demo, it's not a crash course in AI, it's not a lecture on the technologies, it's not a philosophy about, you know, whether AI is good or not. It's an extension of all the work that I've done thinking really hard about all these things, channeled through this very compressed experience, and I think that's really important for digital artists who really make their practice about these technologies, is to make sure that they are rooted in serious, research and serious understanding of how the systems work, and I think that does come through in really valuable ways.
All right, so thank you for all the panelists. Please join me, give a big round of applause. Be seated and find a nice, comfy